fall of 1988, a family in Alturas, Florida began to fall ill. First, it was one member, then another, then another. It started with the symptoms of fatigue and numbness. Then came the excruciating burning sensation in their feet. And strangely, after that, their hair began to fall out. Doctors were baffled by these strange symptoms, unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Tests came back inconclusive. The symptoms were so strange and didn't match any common illnesses. And then 41-year-old mother Peggy Carr died of her illness. When she had arrived at the hospital earlier that day, she had told the doctors, quote, "I feel like I'm on fire." It soon became clear that someone was poisoning members of the Carr family. But who? With what? And why? As the investigators looked into the case, they made what seemed at first like an innocuous discovery, but soon took on a chilling significance. In a suspect's house, the man's personal possessions included a worn paperback copy of The Pale Horse by Agatha Christie. This classic mystery features multiple poisoning deaths with eerily similar symptoms to those of the Carr family. In today's video, we are going to talk about The Pale Horse by Agatha Christie and how its depiction of thallium poisoning has helped people around the world solve multiple strange crimes, including the murder of Peggy Carr and the attempted murder of her family. In case you're new here, hi, my name is Jackie. I am a mystery author and a mystery fan, and if you want to see more videos about Agatha Christie and other crime writers, please do hit that subscribe button. In today's video, we are going to discuss what happened to the Carr family in Florida all those years ago, including how the Pale Horse played a role in solving the mystery. But before we do, we need to discuss what is thallium poisoning. Please note that this video will discuss some plot elements of The Pale Horse by Agatha Christie, but it will not give away who is the guilty party in the mystery. Thallium is actually a heavy metal, and nowadays access to it is very tightly controlled. However, in earlier years, it was found in many common products, ranging from anything from rodent poison to hair removal products. In today's world, you would have a hard time getting access to thallium, but back in the day, it was very easily accessible and very deadly, making it a near-perfect murder weapon. Thallium is colorless, odorless, and tasteless, so slipping it into somebody's food or drink is a very easy way to kill them. One of the things about thallium, however, is that it produces a list of extremely strange symptoms. This can make thallium poisoning a difficult thing to diagnose unless you are familiar with the symptoms already. Common symptoms of thallium poisoning include a tingling or burning sensation in the hands or feet, fatigue and muscle weakness, gastrointestinal issues, as well as confusion, disorientation, and neurological symptoms in later stages. But the strangest and most well-known symptom of thallium poisoning today is that it can cause hair loss. Somebody who's been poisoned with thallium will also lose large amounts of their hair. It'll fall out in clumps. While many of the other symptoms of thallium poisoning could be easily explained by viral infections or other ailments, the hair loss is a very unusual symptom that is not often seen. So, how did Agatha Christie and The Pale Horse raise awareness about thallium poisoning? Agatha Christie is known as the Queen of Crime. She is one of, if not the most popular mystery authors of all time, and to this day, she has only been outsold by the Bible and Shakespeare. Agatha Christie has often been praised for the sophisticated knowledge of poisons displayed in her mystery novels. And that's because actually during World War I, Agatha Christie worked at a pharmacy. And it was there that she learned a lot about medicines and some of the substances in them that could become fatal in large doses. Agatha Christie used some form of poisons as a murder weapon in more than half of her novels and short stories, and The Pale Horse is no exception. In this book, there is a string of strange deaths in which many seemingly unrelated people are dying potentially due to supernatural forces. However, as the book unfolds, it is determined that it's not the paranormal that is killing these people. They are all victims of thallium poisoning, and the characters are able to determine this because every single one of the victims experienced strange hair loss before their demises. Agatha Christie describes the symptoms of thallium poisoning in this book strikingly well, in a time when the symptoms of thallium poisoning were not well known. And the detail with which she describes thallium poisoning and its effects not only made her book better, it also made her book useful. So let us return to 1988 in Florida, where the Carr family has recently lost their matriarch, Peggy. At this point, Agatha Christie was already dead, but she still plays a role in this story. The investigators started digging, trying to find a potential motive. Why would someone want the Carr family dead? Seemingly, they were an ordinary family, not someone who you would think would be the victim of a killer. However, the police did turn up a lead because it turns out that in June of 1988, the Carr family had received a strange, anonymous letter informing them that if they did not leave Florida, all of them would die. At the time, perhaps they didn't take it seriously, but now that Peggy was dead and several other members of the family were suffering from poisoning symptoms, it seemed like this letter wasn't just a prank. It was actually a threat, and now someone had acted on it. As the police started interviewing potential suspects and the Carr family's acquaintances, they zeroed in on one particular person. His name was George Treple, and he was the Carr family's next door neighbor. He was a former chemist who also loved throwing murder mystery parties with his wife. George Treple and his wife lived next door to the Carr family, and since the Carrs had moved in, tensions had simmered between the two households. Par Erlin Carr, Peggy's husband, had gotten this idea in his head that he was going to construct an apartment over his garage for his daughter and granddaughter to live in. However, their neighbor, George Treple, did not want this apartment to be built, and he actually complained to the zoning board. Now, Mr. Carr was breaking regulations by constructing this apartment, and so the project was canceled. However, the Treples and the Carrs did not get along in harmony after that. George Treple's wife had on multiple occasions made noise complaints against the Carrs' children. Apparently, she thought that the Carr children played their radios too loud. The police were interviewing multiple people close to the Carrs, and when they were interviewing George Treple, they asked him, "Why do you think that someone may have potentially wanted to harm the Carr family?" And George's answer was simple: to get them to move out. Now, this answer to their question was particularly illuminating because the threatening letter that the Carrs received had said that exact same thing, that if they didn't move out of Florida, they were all going to die. As the police continued their investigation, they were able to determine the cause of Peggy Carr's death and her family members' illness. 8 Coca-Cola bottles found inside the Carr's home tested positive for traces of thallium. Though Peggy was the only fatality, several other members of her household were ill, having consumed varying amounts of thallium poisoning, likely from the Coke bottles. Peggy was the only member of the family to indeed pass away, and the police tested samples of her urine, which came back positive for having 20 times the safe amount of thallium. The police actually contacted representatives from the Coca-Cola brand to see if potentially the thallium could have gotten into the Coke bottles while they were being produced. However, the representatives from Coca-Cola confirmed they had not received any other complaints of contaminated shipments. Obviously, there were so many people across America who consumed Coke products, so if the Carrs were the only people to have thallium in their Coke bottles in all of America, that meant that this was not some horrible accident. This was a deliberate attempt to murder the family. And now George Trepple, the next-door neighbor with a known grudge against the Carrs, a history in the chemistry profession, and a love of murder mystery dinners, became the prime suspect in the murder investigation. While searching the Trepple household, the police discovered many interesting things, including chemistry equipment, a bottle that contained powdered thallium, lab notebooks, a bottle capping machine like the one that would be used on Coke bottles, and a copy of The Pale Horse by Agatha Christie, a murder mystery that involves deaths by thallium poisoning, the exact same thing that killed Peggy Carr and nearly killed other members of her family. It seemed like Trepple had used his chemistry equipment and his bottle capping machine to put thallium in the Coke bottles. These Coke bottles then ended up at the Carr family's home, where Peggy, her son, and her stepson consumed them. George Trepple was arrested, and in 1991, he was convicted of Peggy Carr's murder. To this day, he remains on death row in Florida and maintains his innocence in the killing. While The Pale Horse may have been used as a source of inspiration for George Trepple when he was planning the murders of his neighbors, this book has actually saved lives as well, meaning this is not entirely a dark and gloomy story. In 1975, Agatha Christie received a fan letter from a woman who worked in the healthcare profession. This woman who lived in South America told Agatha Christie in this letter that at her job she actually saved a man's life because she recognized his symptoms as that of thallium poisoning. And the reason she was able to recognize the symptoms was because she had read The Pale Horse. This woman said in the letter that she wrote to Christie, quote, "Of this I am quite certain. Had I not read The Pale Horse and thus learned of the effects of thallium poisoning, X would not have survived." And in a twist that felt pulled out of an Agatha Christie novel, this South American nurse believed that the person who had attempted to murder her patient was the man's own wife. Obviously, the nurse did not reveal more personal patient information in this letter, so I do not know what ended up happening afterward, but she does believe that the reason she saved this man's life is because she had read this Agatha Christie novel. Just 2 years later, in 1977, after Agatha Christie's death, another life was saved. A 19-month-old girl suffering from strange symptoms was flown from Qatar to London for medical treatment. Nobody knew exactly what was ailing this young child. In the hospital, she was fading fast, and doctors were puzzled about what the cause of her symptoms were. But then a nurse named Marcia Maitland, who was making her rounds, made a passing comment that the girl's symptoms reminded her of a book that she had just read, The Pale Horse by Agatha Christie. Inspired by that insight, the doctors sent samples to Scotland Yard for testing, and sure enough, this young girl had extremely high levels of thallium in her body. They ultimately believed that she had accidentally ingested an insecticide, and that was the cause of the thallium poisoning. Now that they knew the cause, doctors were able to treat this young girl, saving her life, all because of Marcia Maitland's literary memory. Later, the British Journal of Hospital Medicine would directly credit Agatha Christie for raising awareness about the symptoms of thallium poisoning in medicine. So that is how The Pale Horse by Agatha Christie inspired a killer and also saved at least 2 lives. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button to see more from me. I post new videos every single week. If you watched this video through to the finish, drop a magnifying glass emoji in the comments section. And if you're an Agatha Christie fan who wants to watch another one of my videos, why don't you check out this one where I rank every single Agatha Christie mystery that I have read so far. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you all, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you next time.